Look at your brokerage account right now, look at the screen, and tell me if your hand is shaking because the global macroeconomic chessboard just caught on fire. If you are sitting there checking your phone every 3 minutes waiting for some talking head on corporate television to tell you everything is going to be perfectly fine, you need to wake up. Right now, the mainstream media is out here feeding you gentle bedtime stories, but today we are diving headfirst into the cold, hard asset, shattering truth that nobody else has the guts to tell you. While Donald Trump is out here posting on social media claiming that his administration has successfully brokered a ceasefire and moved on from the era of epic fury, the actual physical data on the ground is screaming a completely different story. In the past 24 hours, 2 major nuclear sites in the Middle East have literally exploded. And the corporate news networks are completely silent about it. Let us look at the actual facts, because in Abu Dhabi, inside the United Arab Emirates, a critical nuclear facility was just hit by an enemy drone, and there is currently a massive active fire burning at the location. Fire and rescue services are currently swarming the Al Dhafar region this morning, desperately responding to a direct drone strike that resulted in a catastrophic fire inside an electrical generator just outside the inner perimeter of the Baraka nuclear power plant. The authorities right now are scrambling to report no civilian injuries, but I have the official statement right here from the UAE Defense Ministry. They are openly admitting that 3 separate hostile drones were tracking directly toward the multi-billion-dollar facility, and while their defense systems managed to strike down 2 of the aircraft, one single drone successfully penetrated the airspace and slammed right into the nuclear facility generator, sending thick, black smoke into the sky. Then you turn your eyes directly to Israel, where just yesterday, local residents witnessed a massive, terrifying mushroom cloud rising after a violent explosion was reported near the Mika Air Base in Beit Shemesh. The official government line out of Israel is claiming that this was a totally contained detonation that was completely pre-planned, but there are a trillion red flags waving around that statement. Let us use some basic common sense here, because if you are going to execute a controlled, pre-planned explosion at a sensitive military site that results in a giant mushroom cloud visible for miles, you would normally notify the civilian population beforehand so people do not completely lose their minds. Israel has never officially announced to the world that this specific base is their prime nuclear weapons storage site, but it is widely known throughout the international intelligence community that this is exactly where they keep their atomic arsenal, yet they expect us to believe this was just a routine controlled explosion at a standard civilian factory, folks. 2 nuclear sites are actively smoking in the past 24 hours, and you cannot find a single mention of it on the front pages of the corporate financial networks. So what exactly is the Trump administration doing while these critical energy and geopolitical corridors are turning into an absolute inferno? They are running the classic time-tested Ponzi scheme playbook. When you are running a regime built on illusions and you face a catastrophic, unmanageable crisis in one part of the world, you do not fix it. You simply move on to a brand new problem by manufacturing an entirely different conflict somewhere else to completely distract the public. You move on from one set of structural failures by creating a fresh pretext for a brand new war, and right on cue, they are deploying their media assets to push the narrative. Look at the front page of Axios this morning, where Barack Ravid drops a massive exclusive report that reads like a perfect Hollywood script designed to trigger the MAGA base into an absolute frenzy. Ravid claims that the communist regime in Cuba has suddenly acquired more than 300 high-tech military drones and has recently initiated advanced operational discussions to use these weapons to launch direct attacks against the United States naval base at Guantanamo Bay, American military vessels patrolling the Caribbean, and potentially Key West, which sits just 90 miles north of Havana. The article outlines exactly what the Trump administration is supposedly thinking behind closed doors. But let us cut straight through the garbage. They are actively building a geopolitical pretext to launch a full-scale military invasion of Cuba. This is the exact same underlying script they tried to run in Venezuela. It is the exact same playbook they ran into a wall with in Iran, and now they are rotating their focus to Cuba because it is a convenient 90-mile-away target. Right before the critical midterm elections, we already know for a fact that CIA Director John Ratcliffe was secretly on the ground in Cuba at the end of last week, holding classified level meetings about potential military interventions. We also know that the Trump administration is preparing to formally issue an international arrest warrant for 94-year-old Raul Castro, who is not even involved in the day-to-day operations of the Cuban government anymore and acts as nothing more than a spiritual figurehead for the old regime. And the most hilarious part of this entire propaganda push is that the Axios article explicitly notes that Cuba received all of these advanced military drones and technical equipment directly from Russia. Let us look at the actual math of how we got here, because Donald Trump has systematically spent the last several months removing heavy economic sanctions on Vladimir Putin, pulling 4,000 to 5,000 highly trained United States troops completely out of Poland, where they were supposed to be deployed as a shield. and launch relentless verbal attacks against our own NATO allies. And now the administration is acting shocked that Russia turned around and handed a fleet of military drones to Cuba. Donald Trump personally allowed heavily armed Russian naval vessels to sail right through the United States naval blockade around the island. I told you guys exactly what was happening at that time while everyone else was sleeping, because when a massive Russian warship sails into a port of, call 90 miles from Florida, under the guise of humanitarian aid, you have to be completely delusional to think they are only carrying boxes of food and medicine. They were actively delivering military hardware and drone infrastructure right under our noses because the administration decided that a naval blockade is only an actual blockade when it applies to former American allies like Canada or Mexico who want to engage in standard commerce. But the moment a Russian ship shows up, the administration paper hands the policy and lets them slide right through the gate. And right on schedule, the MAGA Republican caucus in Florida starts blasting out coordinated social media posts to prep the retail public for a brand new conflict. You have Congressman Mario Diaz, Balart, Congressman Carlos Gimenez, and Congresswoman Maria Elvira Salazar all synchronized, using their heritage to sell out their own local constituents in Florida, just in time to try and win back the Latino voting demographic that has completely abandoned Donald Trump. They honestly think the American public is completely stupid. Diaz. Balart immediately jumps on Twitter declaring that we have all seen the horrific threat that drones pose in the Middle East, and now that they are sitting 90 miles from our shores near critical American infrastructure, it is completely clear that the Cuban regime poses an immediate national security threat. Carlos Gimenez follows up with the exact same script, calling Cuba a dangerous threat to the homeland, while Maria Elvira Salazar chimes in warning every single American citizen that a hostile dictatorship aligned with our worst foreign adversaries is operating a drone fleet right next to Florida. Let us be completely real about the economics of this situation, because the United States government has been systematically starving the civilian population of Cuba to death for decades through a brutal trade embargo, and now that the administration is threatening total military annihilation, they act completely surprised that the Cuban government looked across the ocean and bought defensive weapons from Russia. The propaganda being generated by this administration is not even high quality propaganda. It is sloppy, it is rushed, and it assumes that you have the memory of a goldfish. And if you want definitive proof that a major military escalation is actively being prepared behind the scenes, while the public watches the corporate news media talk about nonsense, just look at the global aviation transponder data. As we speak, 11 massive United States Air Force C-17, a Globemaster transport aircraft, are simultaneously leaving the Middle East and flying directly toward military staging hubs in Europe. This is not a routine training exercise, because this exact same massive, synchronized departure pattern happened back in late February, right before Trump and Netanyahu launched their joint strike operations inside Iran. We are entering a state of permanent, never-ending global warfare, and the administration has absolutely no long-term exit strategy other than trying to social media post their way out of structural economic collapse. Look at what Donald Trump just posted this morning, completely attacking conservative Congressman Thomas Massie, calling him the worst Republican congressman in history because Massie had the audacity to vote against specific tax bills and border funding lines. Thomas Massie is quite literally one of the most structurally conservative, fiscally disciplined right-wing politicians in Washington. And he has voted alongside Trump the vast majority of the time, but this proves that the modern MAGA movement has absolutely nothing to do with traditional fiscal conservatism or protecting the taxpayer. It is a complete cult of personality centered around absolute loyalty to one single man in a golden ballroom. When Thomas Massie, Lauren Boebert, Marjorie Taylor Greene, and Nancy Mace explicitly demanded that the federal government release the full, unredacted Jeffrey Epstein files to finally expose the billionaire child sex trafficking ring, Donald Trump personally called them and told them to shut it down because those names belong to his personal friends. The administration has systematically weaponized its political apparatus to target and destroy the career of any politician who helped leak those files to the public, which tells you absolutely everything you need to know about the moral bankruptcy of the entire political class. Meanwhile, you have Senator Lindsey Graham going on the Sunday morning news shows, actively begging the Pentagon to launch even more bombs into the Middle East, openly stating that Iran's energy infrastructure is their soft underbelly and that the United States needs to completely obliterate their oil fields to force them into a deal. Graham is out there claiming that if we keep running the same old limited strikes, we will get the same old results. So we need to completely crush their economy until they realize they cannot wait us out. This is exactly why having an accurate, data-driven media diet is the single most critical factor for your financial survival right now. I get my news directly from ground news because I refuse to let bias right-wing or left-wing corporate media outlets dictate how I view the global economy. Ground news uses an incredibly powerful algorithm that aggregates thousands of news sources from across the planet for every single story, showing you the exact political bias and factuality rating of who is publishing what. For example, this morning a young couple in Kiev was tragically killed in a brutal Russian ballistic missile strike while hoping to start a family. And when you look at the ground news data, there is virtually zero coverage of this escalation from any right-wing media sources in America. The platform has a dedicated blind spot feature that instantly highlights what stories are being completely hidden from you based on your political geography, which is why I use it every single morning to prepare my market analysis. I believe in this tool so much that I partnered with them to get you guys a massive 40% discount on their top-tier Vantage plan. So stop letting corporate conglomerates manipulate your worldview. Click the link in the description right now to grab that deal and start looking at raw data instead of corporate propaganda. While the global energy supply is actively sitting on a powder keg, what is Speaker of the House Mike Johnson doing? He is standing out on the Washington Mall doing soft ball interviews with state propaganda networks, telling the public that he understands Americans are feeling stressed about their personal financial situation, but that the government will get around to fixing your kitchen table economic issues just as soon as they deploy the military to forcefully reopen the Strait of Hormuz. Johnson is trying to shift the blame for record high domestic gas prices onto international shipping bottlenecks, completely ignoring the fact that his own congressional leadership is the exact reason those shipping lanes are closed in the first place. A recent CBS News poll revealed that 76% of the American population is actively terrified about the direction of the country, and 67% of everyday working class people are experiencing extreme psychological stress regarding their personal bank accounts. And Mike Johnson's brilliant solution is to spread the outright lie that the reason the United States cannot negotiate an end to the shipping blockade is because Iran supposedly has no official leaders left alive. After our successful military operations, that is an absolute verifiable lie designed for a politically uneducated audience. The official leadership structure of the Islamic Republic is completely intact. The IRGC is fully operational, and European diplomats are calling Iranian Foreign Minister Ali Bagheri Khani and Parliament leader Mohammad Bagher Ghalibaf on a daily basis. In fact, Ghalibaf was just officially named as a special presidential envoy to China following Trump's disastrous diplomatic trip to Beijing. If you do even a modicum of independent research, you can see who is running their parliament, who is managing their courts, and who is directing their military strategy. But the administration would rather lie to your face to cover up the fact that their foreign policy is entirely driven by Donald Trump's personal delusions of global conquest. Then you look at Trump's trade representative, Jamieson Greer, who is currently doing a media victory lap trying to spin their completely empty trip to China as some sort of massive win for American agriculture. The conservative Wall Street Journal editorial board openly called out Greer this morning, explicitly questioning whether the Trump summit achieved a single tangible benefit for the United States economy. Trump has been boasting on social media about fantastic multi-billion-dollar Chinese purchase agreements for American soybeans and commercial aircraft, but the Chinese ministry has refused to confirm a single line of those sales. Wall Street analysts have pointed out that the administration is playing a massive shell game, repeatedly announcing the exact same past trade agreements from 3 years ago and pretending they are brand new breakthroughs. When Greer was pressed for specific details, he choked on camera, admitting that they only have a vague aggregate agreement for double-digit purchases of general agricultural products like beef and grains that still hasn't been nailed down or put into a binding legal contract. Let us look at the raw reality of the agricultural market, because under the previous administration, China was consistently purchasing 29 million metric tons of American soybeans every single year without the government needing to hold an emergency press conference about it. So when the current administration's trade war forces China to completely halt purchases, and then they eventually agree to buy less than half of their original historical volume, that is not a geopolitical victory. That is a catastrophic structural loss for the American farmer. This entire political class consists of entitled, privileged individuals who systematically describe their massive economic failures as historic victories because they want a participation trophy for destroying global trade stability. And Lindsey Graham made it completely clear this morning that if any traditional Republican politician refuses to bow down to the Trump cult or demands transparency on the Epstein files, they will be aggressively targeted, defunded, and cast out of the party. Look at Senator Bill Cassidy, who just officially lost his primary election in Louisiana simply because he voted to adhere to constitutional law during the previous impeachment trials. Wall Street special interest groups are actively pumping over $40 million into primary challenges against guys like Thomas Massie, backing puppet candidates who literally refuse to stand on a debate stage because they cannot defend their own policy positions. The message from leadership is simple: if you stand in the way of the political agenda, you will be destroyed, because the modern conservative movement has been completely replaced by a corporate cult of personality. And to top it all off, Trump's acting Attorney General Todd Blanche openly admitted on national television that the Department of Justice is dedicating massive amounts of taxpayer funding and federal prosecutor hours to try and investigate the results of the 2020 election. 6 years later, while everyday American citizens are struggling to pay for basic healthcare, struggling to put gas in their vehicles, and watching their grocery bills compound at double-digit rates, the highest law enforcement agency in the country is running around trying to prove a historical mirage to satisfy one man's ego. Blanche literally told Fox News that they are executing good old-fashioned police work across multiple states to figure out who voted 6 years ago. And Maria Bartiromo just nodded along like a mindless robot, claiming that this is exactly what the American public truly cares about right now. No, it is not. Everyday Americans do not care about validating a billionaire's historical grievances. They care about whether they can afford to feed their children next week without draining their savings accounts. The entire political apparatus has turned into a giant coordinated circus of con artists, frauds, and pathetic individuals who are actively making the economic position of the United States significantly weaker on the global stage. So let us take off the political analysis filter and look at the hard, cold, undeniable mathematical data regarding how you protect your personal capital from being completely vaporized by this incoming macro storm. When geopolitical conflict escalates to the point of nuclear generator fires and threatened naval blockades, the structural risk to traditional fiat currency and speculative equities skyrockets. High energy prices act as a massive drag on corporate profit margins, which means companies that are currently trading at insane price to earnings multiples are incredibly vulnerable to a massive technical correction. This is exactly why you need to stop acting like a reckless retail day trader who channel flips through internet hype cycles trying to find the next 100x penny stock. Your small account principal will get completely wiped out by institutional algorithm volatility if you are constantly chasing high beta garbage. Your single non-negotiable mission in this environment is to establish a fortress portfolio that actively runs faster than the real, unvarnished rate of inflation. When the macro landscape turns into a volatile quagmire, institutional smart money doesn't buy speculative tech options. It systematically flows into high-quality, cash-generating foundational assets.